to another Just 5 Mins, the Christmas Day 2025 edition. Yeah, sounds a bit sad, doesn't it? On a Christmas Day morning, I'm talking to a microphone. Hey, some would call that dedication. I would call it stupidity. But anyway, either way, a Merry Christmas if that's what you have, or happy holidays, or whatever it is that anything. Anyway, it doesn't really matter, does it? I mean, most people will hopefully get some time off, time to relax and whatnot. So that's always good. And yeah, what a year. I know it's not quite finished yet, but it's sort of heading that way, isn't it? So it's been a bit of a crazy year, isn't it, really? Well, in some ways. Certainly 2025 was the year of agents, which I think, regardless whether you use them or not, it probably has. Certainly from coding agents, I guess, and all these agents that go off and do various things for you and all the rest of it. You know, how useful they are. I'm sure there are lots of really good use cases, but there is an awful lot of agents just, I don't know, doing silly stuff. But the silly stuff for one person is important for someone else. So it's good not to, not to criticize too much. I think it's all like everything. It's moving so fast. Everybody's trying to jump on the bandwagon, and it's rattling. That bandwagon is rattling across like a rocky landscape, and things are falling off and whatever. And at the end, maybe what we're left with is probably going to be something really useful. Which brings me on to, and I know everybody's been doing this, so it really isn't new. Call it vibe coding, call it augmented coding. I tried to get my sad developer moniker out there, but it didn't quite work, did it? Super augmented developer just didn't work. But anyway, well, we'll throw that into the graveyard of vibe coding. But anyway, I have been using a lot of things. Like everybody, you experiment with all of these tools, and again, a lot of things have come and gone. I mean, you've still got things like Cursor, the fork of VS Code that seems to be doing quite well on its own. VS Code itself, which I'm going to come back to shortly, which is sort of, it's all flavors of ice cream, but that's my vanilla flavor. And I'll explain why I like it in a bit. But you've got things like, what else came along? I mean, there was Google Firebase Studio, there's Replit or Replit, Lovable, all these online hosted vibe coding things. But obviously, I think one of the interesting ones that was around, because Windsurf was originally going to get bought by OpenAI for some billions or something, wasn't it? And then it all fell through, which is fair enough. These things happen. But then obviously it emerged that Google Anti-Gravity, one of the, I don't know, does it say what it is? I don't know, Anti-Gravity. Anyway, but basically Google Anti-Gravity is Windsurf, essentially, isn't it? It's been reborn in the Google sphere of AI coding with Gemini and everything else. But again, they're all flavors of ice cream, but they've all got their strengths. And I mean, they're all of those IDEs are built on VS Code. And some would say, why do you even need an IDE these days? Claude Code at the command line, Gemini CLI at the command line, OpenAI's Codex at the command line if you want to do that. And I mean, the weird thing is, you can do everything from the command line if that's your flavor. You don't need an IDE. I don't know, maybe I'm old school. I still like an IDE to actually look at the code, although you can look at the code through those other methods as well. It's just, it's just what you get used to, isn't it? And we're back to flavors of ice cream, as I like to call it. And they, that's the point, is that building all of this stuff now, it really is, and it's not meant to sound elitist or anything, because I am by far not a solution architect really, or even a good developer or anything like that. But I think where I've found, and I think this is what a lot of the industry has been talking about, is, you know, junior programmers or mid-level programmers or developers. You know, it really does feel like the shift is going to, dare I say, solution architects, really, or product managers, or whatever that abstracted level is above. Okay. And the reason I say that, from my own experience, actually building a couple of non-trivial apps of late, that have actually done a reasonable job. But I'll explain a funny little side effect of my GitHub Copilot subscription in a second. But I think that's what we're doing. We're getting to that point where, as like a solution architect, you've got a good idea of the components that you need and why you need them, more importantly. So, you know, do you need an actual SQL Server database, or do you just need, you know, an unstructured store like Cosmos DB or whatever those other ones are out there? Or even, do you even need that? You know, I've got some applications using Azure storage tables because it doesn't need any relational data. I just need, you know, some unstructured data being stored. Anyway, there's a lot of options, but knowing those options when and where, and you'll still get tripped up, and you, well, actually, I do need this or that. And it's like, you know, where you need like queuing methodologies, you know, whether it's, you know, Service Bus or whatever, RabbitMQ, you know, or do you need, you know, real-time integration like with SignalR or Server Sent Events or all those sorts of things. And all of these things, it's not that you even have to be an absolute expert in these things. And I guess it also depends on the flavor and frameworks that you're using, you know. But if you know enough of those component points in whatever flavor of frameworks and language you use, it is amazing because you can really put this stuff together. So the actual coding is what you'd normally delegate down to, you know, a couple of developers to go say, right, here's the architecture, go and build it, you know. So I think that is, and that in my experience, and I've built a couple of apps now. Now I've got them on Azure. You could put them on Google Cloud Compute. You could do something similar with Amazon Web Services or whatever. You know, I'm sort of past all the different, you know, worries and concerns really in a lot of ways, because it's just what works for you. You know, that's the flavor of ice cream. What do you feel that you want to use? And that's fine. And but what I found was knowing a few of those points. And again, I'm not an expert in necessarily, you know, message queuing. I mean, I've worked with a few message queues over the years, way back to IBM MQ series. Goodness me, that was a long time ago. But there are a few things, and I think that's the bit. If, you know, I know there's all these like YouTubes out there, like if I was to start again, you know, all of those things, which is totally, you know, but I would now be looking more like the solution architect type stuff, you know, which, you know, I know it's not trivial, and you do have to put a bit of work in to learn a lot of this stuff, but I think you're at that level where once you know those components that need to talk to each other, because let's face it, AI is creating front ends like left, right, and center, isn't it? You know, I mean, dare I say, you know, although all the design stuff like Figma and things like that, I'm not going to say it's irrelevant, because there's still, you know, there's still a need to actually prototype stuff and things like that. But, you know, the actual build of front ends is becoming so good with AI. You know, you like a lot of my stuff that I've built, I purposely haven't used any frameworks like React or Vue or anything like that, because it doesn't really need it. You know, it's written in nice, clean vanilla JavaScript or TypeScript. if you want to use that. But ultimately, it's horses for courses again, flavors of ice cream. So so with the front ends taken care of, it's then how do you hook this up to a database? How do you and it's all the plumbing. How do you host this? Where do you host it? How is it? Has it got decent security? Like a couple of the apps I've built, they're all using. It's all C#.net because that's where I'm comfortable with. But it could be again other flavors. But they're all using JWT authorization. You could use other authentication schemes. MS Entra, or again all the other things that you want to use. There's lots of choice, let's face it, but even with the JWT stuff where I'm issuing a token and managing it all that way, things like that at least you've got the level of authentication you then need, it depending on what your app's going to do, but you then need some thorough sort of security testing around that and all the rest of it. And again, are you hosting it yourself and having to look after and patch all the stuff? Of late I'm using Azure Serverless Functions. Doesn't matter, you can use AWS Lambda, that's an equivalent there. Google have got theirs, there's other ones, and the reason for that is that most of the time I'm just really writing web APIs. So by writing Azure Serverless Functions or AWS Lambdas, you're focusing on just the endpoint and the logic that supports that. You can get into microservices and use Microsoft, .NET Aspire, or is it just Aspire now? So you can actually go whole deep microservices level. But again, in my case, there isn't really a need for all of that complexity. It's just I've got some endpoints that I want to securely deploy. I need them recoverable and scalable, more importantly. And of course, I want to start from zero. I want to start from free, and then scale up. So you're not building, this massive architecture that nobody's really going to use. And more to the point, get charged for all of that. So it's been really interesting, and I think that's where there's really that need for learning about some of those architectural principles without going too deep. It depends, again, what role you're going to go for. If you're going to go for an enterprise architect role, well, crikey, there's a lot more to that, I'm sure. And even a full solution architect, really depends what you're going for. But if you're working on your own, maybe, perhaps, you just need that level of architecture understanding of these components that you can use. And again, one of the important things is why you would use that, why you wouldn't use that, those sorts of things. And I think that's relatively straightforward. Maybe I'm being underestimating, but it's a relatively easy enough concept to get your head around and learn, because there's lots of resources for this stuff. So that's what I've been playing with, and we're back to I've settled on VS Code because it's just vanilla. I've got all the extensions I need. I know Cursor and Windsurf, or Anti-Gravity as it's called now, I've got, you can still use all the VS Code stuff, but I've kept to the, because I like the vanilla flavor, as I've mentioned. But interestingly, I've got a subscription to GitHub Copilot Pro. It's about $10 a month. And, I've just been dabbling around. But when I've started to build some more serious type of apps, I decided to use some of the premium models, because a lot of people don't realize VS Code supports all the models. You've got everything from the Claude, Opus, Haikus, all those models, all the OpenAI Codex models, GPT 5.2 as the time of this recording anyway. And you can access Grok, you can access... So rather than jumping around all of those other, tools, and also, by the way, Claude and OpenAI and things like that, and Grok and Gemini, not to miss Gemini out, they've all now got really clean add-ins to VS Code anyway. So again, if you want to go use the CLI, brilliant. You can still use the CLI, by the way, in VS Code. But again, I like an IDE of sorts to see a few bits as well. So it is really quite fascinating, actually. But VS Code for me has got all of those flavors of models, including which I found the Claude, is it Claude Opus? Yeah, Opus 4.5, I think, or whatever it is. That was actually surprisingly good. But so was OpenAI's GPT 5.2, I think. Which one's this one? Codex, isn't it? The 5.2. I tried using Max for a little bit, but you burn through tokens like nothing right there. But anyway, I funny enough, about halfway through the month of my GitHub Copilot, $10 a month, gives me access to all of those models, by the way, so it's relatively cheap to test out a lot of those models. But because I'd used the premium models, and it did do a very good job, so not to knock it, but my goodness, it burnt through those in half a month. So, but then I ended up switching because I'd added the OpenAI's Codex plugin to VS Code. And I've just carried on with Codex, which is essentially using GPT 5.2 Codex anyway. But again, you can start to burn through a lot of this. But when I look back, at what has been created through using those premium models, that, let's face it, $10 or even if it was $20 US a month, that is incredible when you think there's only a few years ago. Prior to that, you'd have to, outsource that. Or even on Upwork or Fiverr or something. I doubt you'd be able to get that level of code for that cost. And that's the weird thing. We just got to take a beat here and think. I know, it's easy to criticize and throw things at these things and, that doesn't work, or that, that's just novelty. But actually, when you really go down to the lower level, of how this has worked. And like I say, I've got, a full application that is pretty solid. I've looked through it. It's actually really quite a decent, solid back end, front end, with all the components. I've got some queuing in there for some processing, but it's minimal. I've got a database in there, and to have written all that, because let's face it, there is always plumbing around all of that stuff. Like even the login process, or the sign up process. There's an awful lot of code going around. Issuing JWT tokens, getting the bearer token back, or doing all this. There's a lot of plumbing around that you don't normally see, and that's not really glamorous, but you need. And again, to have coded all that manually, I mean, that it's just, it's brain aching stuff, isn't it? That. So VS Code is. I mean, I'm still playing with Cursor and anti-gravity, and even some of the online stuff like Lovable and Replit, things like that. But the only problem with those platforms, for me personally, is that you've got some decent free tiers with all of those things. But ultimately, if you really want to go production with this stuff, you're paying a monthly cost, and you're paying something somewhere. But I like the fact that I can, all this stuff that I've worked with, I can test it all locally. I've got CI/CD through GitHub, continuous integration, continuous development, as they call it. And that just, once I commit to my main branch, or push to my main branch, should I say, that gets a new build going straight through to my Azure Serverless Functions or my web apps or whatever it is. And off you go and watch everything collapse in a heap. No, it shouldn't, should it? But yeah. But like I say, I've got control over that. And, to start with, at least, all of the environmental stuff is free. I've got a free SQL database. I've got free serverless functions, free static web apps. And obviously you can then at a click of a button, you know, when you want to really go production, is, you know, sort of switch it up to production mode. So Azure serverless functions like Lambda and stuff like that, it's gone through a lot of changes over the years. But one of the issues in the past, if you're using the free version even, is that you know your serverless function will close down when it's not being used, you know, and then it's got a few seconds, maybe a few more seconds actually, to warm up and be accessible. But you can easily rectify that now and it doesn't cost you know, more than you know, a few dollars anyway to go to a production level. But anyway, there's some really cool stuff that you can do. And again, you can decide, you know what, I want to go and host this on AWS or Google or another platform, as long as it supports the coding stuff. And even the Azure serverless functions, by the way, can be run in Docker containers these days, have done for a while, by the way. And this technology has been around a long time now, so it's pretty solid. So you can containerize this stuff as well. So wherever you can run Docker, you can run this stuff anyway. But I think it's that we're back to flavors of ice cream that you want, isn't it? Where do I want to host this? How do I want to host this? But again, I think the way that this agent stuff is working, and by the way, some of the more complicated code that I've been using and they're all supporting this now, but in VS Code, it's had it for a few months now, is the plan mode. And I think I forgot to mention this, it's quite important. If you go into plan mode and be quite descriptive of what you want, the plan mode will produce the requirements document. And even though it'll go through planning of what you want to build, and you can say start implementing, which is great, but you can also go edit the requirements document ultimately. It's all marked down, but you can then go through and actually check the plan, the requirements plan for your application. And obviously you can tweak it as well, you know, where you need to. Then once you're happy with it, you can say start implementing and the agents will go to work. And of course, you've now got local agents that run locally and they can access your terminal if you want it to. You can have all of this, usually has got the usual allow, all that type stuff. But you can hand off in VS Code. You can hand off coding agents in the cloud as well. And again, other vendors are doing this as well, you know, so it's quite incredible what you can achieve with just a bit of an understanding of that solution architect sort of like frame that you working with. But yeah, what an interesting time. But I think personally, you know, I know it's all, you know, clickbait and highlights and everything, but I think 2025 has been the year of agents, but how they've been used is something, you know, that's open to question, I guess. And we'll see what 2026 will bring. But anyway, it's ended up being a little bit of a ramble, a Christmas ramble. But anyway, there we go. We'll see what the new year brings. So have a lovely Christmas or break or seasonal holidays or whatever it is that you call them. Have a lovely, peaceful time, and we'll catch you in 2026, no doubt.